Hello everyone and welcome to yet another edition of FTOPS 8 Final Table Highlights. I'm NLHE and today it's time for the two-day No Limit Hold'em event highlights. That event hosted by Phil Ivey, a $2,500 buy-in, 899 players ponied up, bringing the prize pool to $2.2 million. And first place would take home over $516,000. Taking a look at the chip counts, not the real Phil Ivey, but Phil Ivey 567 was at the top of the leaderboard with over $1 million in chips. If he dies, she dies on the short stack at $160,000. We kick things off with the blinds at 6 and 12,000, ante of $1,500 a man. It was folded around to C King USC, who would lay it down over to Halfrick. Halfrick third in chips to get things started. Almost $600,000 in his stack as he made it $32,000 to go. If he dies, he dies, laid down on the button. The Stein mucked the small blind, and it was over to Haas TBF, a very prolific limit hold'em player who pushed all in for almost $250,000. Halfrick would make the call with ace-king offsuit up against pocket sixes. Haas TBF was in good shape on the flop, but on the turn, Halfrick spiked an ace, and Haas couldn't connect with the two outer on the river as he was eliminated in 9th place. Phil Ivey 567 was still your chip leader with the blinds up to 8 and 16,000. Antes were up to 2,000 a man. Lil Fishy would open the pot, making it 40,000 and change. Halfrick would think it over and eventually re-raise to 115,000 and change. Action was folded all the way back around to Lil Fishy, who would move all in and show ace-queen offsuit up against pocket aces. He was in awful shape and was drawing dead on the turn. Case-ace hit the river just for good measure, and Halfrick was the new chip leader as Lil Fishy said goodbye in 8th place. With just 7 players remaining, the button was on if he dies. The Stein and Phil Ivey were in the blinds. Action was folded around to C King USC, down to just 119,000 roughly in his stack. He needed to make a move and make a move fast. He would request time. Next level would be 10 and 20,000 limit with a 2,500 ante, and C King USC still opted to fold. Instead, the Stein and Phil Ivey 567 would find themselves all in heads up. Ivey had made the call with a7 and would flop aces and sevens. The Stein was drawing dead as of the turn and would be eliminated in 7th place, earning a little over $67,000. Blinds were up to 10 and 20,000. Antes were up to 2,500 a man. C King USA would finally ship it all in for his almost 114,000. He would get cold called by if he dies. That prompted Phil Ivey 567 to call as well. Both blinds would fold. Flop was 8-5-6 with a couple of clubs, heads up side pot between if he dies and Phil Ivey. Both players would check. 4 hearts hit the turn. Anyone with a 7 would make a straight. Neither player bet. And on the river, the board paired the 5. Both players checked yet again. If he dies would show ace-queen offsuit, which was good enough to eliminate C King USC, who would take home over $101,000. So Halfrick was down to under $1 million in chips as we pick up the action with J.R. Shappy in the overwhelming chip lead at $2.2 million and change. Binrich moved all in for his $223,000. He would get called by chip leader J.R. Shappy. Halfrick was out of the way on the button. If he dies, called time and then shipped in his entire stack. Ivey folded the big blind. Binrich was of course all in, and the action was on J.R. Shappy, who requested time. He would then fold as Binrich and if he dies would show down. It was king-queen offsuit against pocket queens. Binrich could not connect with a king, and he was eliminated in 5th place, earning over $140,000. With just 4 players remaining in the blinds at 12 and 24,000 with a 3K ante, Phil Ivey 567 found himself on the short stack. Both J.R. Shaffey and Halfrick would lay it down. If he dies, would then raise it to $66,666. Phil Ivey would ship it all in. If he dies, would call with ace-queen suited up against ace-jack suited. Pretty good looking flop for if he dies. Ivey could not connect with the jack on the turn or the river, and he would say goodbye in fourth place, taking home $185,000 and change. Blinds and the antes were steady at 1224 and 3K. If he dies, would open the pot for a raise to $60,000. Chip leader J.R. Shaffey laid down the small blind. Halfrick defended. Thought with 7-5-6 with a couple of spades. Halfrick would check. If he dies, would check behind. Third spade hit the turn. There was also a 6 which paired the board. $141,000 in the pot, and Halfrick would fire just $54,000 and change. A no doubt suspicious looking bet to if he dies, who would raise to $200,000. Action was back on Halfrick, who had $900,000 left in his stack. He would request time. And eventually raise it to $400,000. Ball was now back in if he dies court. And he would ship it all in. Halfrick would call and show the nut flush up against trip sixes. If he dies, could not pair the board or spike a 6 on the end, and Halfrick would take over the chip lead, albeit not by much, while if he dies left himself crippled. If he dies had run his stack back up to over $657,000 as we pick up the action with Halfrick on the button. He would make it $64,000 to go. Little under 3 times the big blind. If he dies, would re-raise $100,000 more. Shaffey was out of the way. Action was back on Halfrick, who would ship it all in and get called. King-queen suited against pocket eights. Halfrick would outflop if he dies, and on the turn, if he dies, needed a 2-outer, which never came, as he said goodbye in third place, earning almost $250,000. So it was down to J.R. Shaffey versus Halfrick, who had already won himself an FTOPS event and was making an impressive run at the championship here. Lines and the antes remained the same. J.R. Shaffey made it $54,000 and change to go. Halfrick would re-raise $100,000 more. Shaffey would just call. Flop was ace-deuce-3 with a couple of clubs. Halfrick would lead out $24,000. Huge underbet. Shaffey would then make it $102,000 and change. Raise of almost $80,000. In came the re-raise from Halfrick as the pot continued to swell. Shaffey would just call. There was a 10 of spades on the turn. Halfrick had control of the pot and would move all in. He had Shaffey covered. Shaffey went into the tank as his meter ran down. And he would lay it down, giving Halfrick the pot and an even bigger chip lead. Lines were up to $15,000 and $30,000 with a 4K ante now. Shaffey had run his stack back up to over $1.7 million as he raised it to $65,000. Just over a min raise. Halfrick would re-raise to $275,000. Action was back on Shaffey, and he would make it almost $600,000 total to go. This was a theme between these two. Halfrick took his time. It was an over $300,000 call if he wanted to make it. He would take what seemed to be forever trying to make up his mind, before eventually calling. Flop was Queen, King, Deuce, Rainbow. Pot was almost 1.2 million. Halfrich checked over to Shaffy. And Shaffy would bet $500,000. Halfrich instantly shipped it all in, and Shaffy would call, showing a pair of queens up against Halfrich's pair of kings. Shaffy could not improve, and he would take home the silver medal, as Halfrich was your champion. So Halfrich would win his second FTOPS 8 bracelet, earning over $500,000 in the process, while J.R. Shaffy didn't do too shabby, taking home $325,000 and change himself for second place. Don't forget, FTOPS 9 is right around the corner. If you'd like to qualify for any of those events that are happening in early August, be sure to visit Full Tilt Poker, click on the tournament lobby, and then the Satellites tab. I hope you've enjoyed this edition of FTOPS 8 Final Table Highlights. Until next time, for Full Tilt Poker, this is Ali Nejad saying so long.